Good morning. There we go. Good morning, afternoon, evening even, Daniela. How is everybody today? Right, we are on the, awesome. We're on the top of the hours. So then we'll hang out here for a minute just while everybody gets themselves, settled and online. Welcome to the Powerful Secrets of Women's Endurance with experts Therese Hammersmith, Daniela Ryf and Ruth Edwards today. We are celebrating National Girls and Women's in Sports Day today, which is a very uplifting day to be celebrating. While we're waiting here, Daniela, I got a question for you. We were just talking about next things that are coming up. You mentioned an epic bike ride that's on your schedule. What is that about?
Yeah, I do. We're for the foundation, we're going to do a bike safari. So with some of the important donors, we have this event planned in March, and really look forward to it. It's going to be hopefully not too scary. I hope we're going to see animals, but I hope we're not going to feel them. So
right. Have you ever done anything like this one before?
No, I haven't. It's nice to be able to do a few more, out of the box things now, being recently retired, and definitely also a lot of projects, of course, going on with the coaching and lots of things happening. But I also enjoy doing some of these events, and we're going to visit some of the projects in Nairobi from my foundation, handing over some food and hygiene products for the girls, which is actually a really important project for us, helping the girls to go to school, because a lot of them can't go to school while they have their period, and because they don't have the products. And it's something small, but it actually makes an impact if you have these 4 days per month where they then can go to school.
Oh, a massive difference that you're making there for those girls and women. Yeah, how exciting. Good for you. Well, let's get started, shall we? Welcome to everybody here who's joining us today to the webinar, Powerful Secrets of Women's Endurance Sport, where you'll learn a little more, maybe, or maybe even reinforce some things that you already know about the physiological advantages of women in endurance sports. Today, we're going to talk about tailored training strategies to maximise an athlete's potential. And I'd say probably the thing that I'm most excited about is hearing exclusive insights from triathlete Daniela Ryf and cyclist Ruth Edwards on leveraging women's strengths in endurance sports. So just a little housekeeping for today. We've got about a 45-minute presentation for you all, and that's going to be followed up by a 10-minute Q&A. So pop your questions in the question box for us. We'll have a look at those at the end, and we'll be asking Ruth and Daniela those questions that you have for them. And also just watch out to the very end. We will be sharing a special discount code for you to use for Human Go. So today is about celebrating women's advantages in endurance sports, but I just want to highlight the fact that today is National Girls and Women's Participation in Sports Day. It's supported by the Women's Sports Federation, and they advocate for equality in sport and have put today on the map as a day to celebrate girls and women in sport. So I think we feel inspired and very fortunate to be able to share what we're about to share with you all here today. This webinar is designed to inspire and to educate. So thank you for joining us today. I am Master Triathlete Coach or Triathlon Coach Rayleigh Harris at Human Go. And as I've already mentioned, we have guest speakers, Daniela Ryf, Ruth Edwards, and Therese Hammersmith joining us today. For some reason, my screen doesn't want to roll forward there. So this is just the outline that I just described for us today, celebrating women's advantages in endurance sports. like I said, we have Daniela Ryf and Ruth Edwards joining us today. Therese is the Performance Director for Human Powered Health. Daniela Ryf is a 10 times world champion triathlete, and Ruth Edwards, our Human Powered Health pro cyclist and 2 times national champion. Let's start with handing over to Therese to talk about the science behind women's endurance sport.
Awesome.
Over
Well,
to you,
thank you,
Therese.
Ray. Yeah, thank you. And I'm really excited to be with all of you today for this incredible day to celebrate girls and women in sports. So what I'm going to talk about today, and I'll keep it brief so we have enough time to talk with Ruth and Daniela, just overall, fat metabolism and utilization of muscle oxygen, the implication of hormonal phases, and just kind of the psychological resilience that women have. So starting off with that first topic, when it comes to endurance events, females seem to have a real edge when it comes to muscular endurance and oxygen usage. And one reason for this edge is the greater proportion of type 1 muscle fibers, or those slow twitch muscle fibers, they possess. Type 1 muscle fibers are designed for long-lasting energy production, and these fibers are rich in capillaries as well as myoglobin. And myoglobin is the protein found in muscle cells that bind and store oxygen. And as well, these type 1 muscle fibers enhance fat oxidation, which provides a steady fuel source over long-duration activities. Additionally, females have been shown to have an enhanced vasodilation response, meaning that there's a greater blood flow that aids in recovery after exercise, as well as cooling down after heat stress. So this metabolic efficiency and flexibility allow women to rely more on fat for energy, preserving glycogen, which is the body's quick burning fuel for when it's needed most. So Ray, actually, can you go back to the previous slide? We're not quite on hormonal phases yet. But so a major component behind this advantage is estrogen, which promotes fat oxidation and helps conserve carbohydrate stores. And as I mentioned just previously, we'll touch on more on hormones in a little bit. And research shows that at the same relative intensity, women burn more fat and fewer carbohydrates than men, enabling them to sustain effort for longer periods of time. And this fuel efficiency is a key reason why women often maintain a more constant pace, especially in those ultra endurance races, while men may struggle or hit a wall when their glycogen stores are depleted. So ultimately, this ability to prioritize fat as a fuel source enhances endurance and resilience to fatigue, giving women a strategic edge in prolonged athletic events. So this combination of type 1 fiber makeup, capillarization, and metabolic flexibility with fat as a primary energy source allows females to recover faster than men from fatiguing exercises. So now, Ray, let's move on to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit more about hormonal phases in the menstrual cycle. So there has been a lot of talk recently about whether the menstrual cycle phases impact endurance performance. And to date, research is still split on whether there is, an advantage or disadvantage. This chart is something that many of you have likely seen before, and we'll just use it as an example to follow along. So first thing to note is that menstrual cycle days vary from woman to woman, usually somewhere between 21 to 35 days and about 2 to 7 days of menstruation. And cycles also vary within individual women, varying somewhere around 8 days. And then additionally, cycle phase length in the follicular phase and luteal phase can vary between 6 and 4 days respectively. And some women might not always ovulate each time. So there's a lot of individuality at play here. And this chart in particular just shows a 28-day cycle. In the follicular phase, which is the first half of the cycle leading up toward ovulation, there's a higher reliance on carbohydrates as the more dominant fuel source. So this is where strength training and higher intensity work might be more efficient, particularly at the beginning of the follicular phase. And then estrogen, so the solid blue line on this chart, begins to rise at the end of the follicular phase, supporting fat oxidation. The luteal phase, or phase after ovulation, promotes increased fat oxidation with the combination of estrogen and progesterone being the solid red line, which suggests endurance-based activities might be favorable during this time. So for endurance athletes, this might be the best time to do your long runs, ride, swim, that zone 2 work. And with that, tracking hormones can be a great advantage for female athletes to be more in tune with their body. Ray is going to touch on this in greater depth during her portion of this talk. So not only is it great to understand your cycle, but this can help women additionally understand when they might be coming sick or need to pull back and rest or push the limits, etc. But, with a caveat, if tracking becomes obsessive or counterproductive, tracking might not be the best for that individual. So all this to be said, each person is different with how they respond to training and how they feel during their cycle as well. The latest research on trained athletes and trained endurance athletes suggests that performance does stay pretty consistent across the cycle. That means that for most women who train regularly, there might not be a need to tweak training intensity or structure workouts differently. So it's an area still that needs more research, as mentioned at the beginning of this slide. But for now, the takeaway that is that if you're well trained, your cycle likely won't make or break your endurance performance. So especially during your performance and on race day in particular, or a big event, your fight or flight response kicks in and allows you to overcome adversity. So lastly, and Ray will move on to the next slide. Lastly, we're going to touch on women's psychological resilience. So for endurance sports, it's not just about your physical abilities and capabilities. It's equally a test of mental resilience. So women often experience a lower perceived exertion, particularly in the ultra endurance events, but endurance events in general, allowing them to sustain effort without feeling as fatigued as men at the same intensity. Additionally, they tend to pace themselves more consistently, conserving energy and avoiding early burnout. And there's been research that supports this advantage. And for example, in races on the longer end, maybe 24 hours or more, women frequently narrow the performance gap with men, and in some cases can even surpass them. And success in these extreme events isn't about the physical stamina, as I mentioned earlier. It's about the ability to push through discomfort, stay mentally engaged, and keep going when it gets tough. So overall, the endurance female athlete has many physiological and psychological superpowers through their efficiency to fuel and be metabolically flexible, enhanced pain tolerance, and overall mental resilience. So overall, that's a good overview of kind of those couple of from the psychological to the physiological. So now Ray will take these principles and talk through some great training strategies for female athletes.
Thanks, Therese. And as you're talking through that, I guess there were a lot of moments in, my training and racing where I thought back and thought, oh yeah, something shifted, something clicked in, and maybe in a way I kind of felt a superpower coming into play without maybe even realizing it. Yeah, it's interesting to reflect on the science and the explanation of why women might be experiencing what they're experiencing, particularly at a lower intensity, but going a lot longer. So the strategy that I wanted to share as kind of my top priority is including strength in your routine. And this is going to ebb and flow through the year, obviously, depending on the sport that you're training or sports that you're training, what your discipline is and where you might be in the season. So it could be during the off season, say, for example, we lean into strength training and resistance training a little bit more. We've got more time, we have more energy to do that because we're not prioritizing the volume and the intensity in the other sports. So adding that as a way of addressing things like hormonal balance, bone density, mobility, stability, coordination, injury prevention, because of all of these things, adding strength in. And to be really clear, it doesn't have to be lifting super heavy in the gym, 4 times a week. We're talking functional strength, body weight resistance, stuff that you can do at home, in the living room, in a fairly short amount of time. So being able to acknowledge what goal you've created for yourself, like what you're actually adding to your season, and being able to adapt the training of the strength training they're adding to your schedule throughout the season is actually a really important aspect of being able to lean into this aspect of training a little bit more. And I know we are talking specifically about men here today, but women, but this is also applicable for men as well. So the benefits that you get from strength training being that, injury prevention, and having those benefits transfer over to your performance are good for both men and women. So adding the strength goal, I guess, even in the off season could be just really emphasizing power or strength building. And one of the things that you can do in Human Go is when you open up your workout card, you can invite a friend along. And this kind of idea of having an accountability buddy, somebody that you are showing up for, improves our likelihood of being able to, not just complete that, but to sort of start that habit in a really frequent and kind of digestible way. So certainly having people along the journey with you can really help in that. So the strategy number 2 that I've included here is paying attention to your subjective scores. And what I mean by that is we have the hard and fast data, and this is really important, right? Like threshold pace is threshold pace, distance is distance. But when it comes to how you're showing up every day, we want to be able to reference something in the future, to come back and say, oh, this particular day or this particular phase or this particular week, I was feeling fantastic, or maybe I wasn't feeling great. Reporting on your mood, your soreness and your fatigue is a critical piece to building the profile of the picture of how you're responding to your training, but also to how you're responding to stress in life. Because in some ways we like to think of, the training module as like a piece in and of itself, but it isn't separate to all the other stress that happens in life. So reporting on a daily basis how you're feeling is something that you can come back to, and it tells the other part of the story. Activity perception is another piece to that. So not just how you showed up today, how you're feeling today, but how did you feel during that workout? Was it harder than you expected? Was it easier than you expected? And making some notes there, recognizing that and making the link back to, oh yeah, that's right. Today I woke up feeling really spunky. No wonder I hit the numbers on that workout. Or, oh yeah, like my mood was a little bit grey this morning. That workout was a bit ho-hum. So this could be talking to your recovery, but also to making those links and connections. So you're starting to listen to the conversation that your body is having. You're listening to the cues, and then you have data that you can actually respond to. I think making these subjective anecdotal kind of reports means that over time we create this longitudinal story that's telling the other half of the picture as far as your training journey is concerned. So we add to this subjective score using health data. For women, this is really critical as we work our way through the menstrual cycle in particular. Heart rate variability, knowing that can be a little higher in the first half of the cycle than the second half. Looking at resting heart rate and how that fluctuates through the different phases of the cycle. Looking at sleep. What was the quality of the sleep? How much sleep did you get? Did you get deep sleep, or were you awake half of the night? There's probably a lot of people on this call that really relate to that. And I know that not all athletes have access to all of this data, right? Not everybody has HRV and resting heart rate and sleep data on a consistent basis. But if you were to pick one of these things and record it consistently over a period of time, again, you're starting to tell more of the story. And so these aspects tell you a little bit more about how you might in fact show up today for your training, or how that race could go this weekend. Looking at how your body, your central nervous system is dealing with the training stress and life stress, will help you maybe moderate your training either up or down, depending on how your body is actually responding. And the key to that is that whether you're making manual adjustments or you're asking Hugo to do this for you, we're making sure that your training is optimized for how your physiology is showing up on any one given day. So I think that it sort of like almost ties it all together. So using all this information, the subjective and, you know, the health data to inform how you adjust the training throughout your cycle is deeply, deeply personal. So coming back to what Therese mentioned earlier, everyone's going to experience this in a different way, which is why kind of, I guess, leaning into taking responsibility for reporting your subjective scores and paying attention to your health data means so much to you as an individual if you're going to get the most out of your training. So some women, you know, they cruise through their menstrual cycle. There's, you know, very little discomfort. It's like, oh yeah, here we go again. This is fine. And others, you know, it can be anything from discomfort to debilitating. We understand this, and so really, really high level understanding how you show up is the importance of that subjective and the health data. So Therese mentioned earlier that perhaps we look at higher, lower intensity training in the first part of the cycle and maybe higher intensity training in the second half of the cycle. Does this mean categorically and scientifically we're going to see better performance down the track? No, not necessarily. But if it feels better to you and it feels like your physiology is showing up more appropriately for lower or higher intensity training, then we can make those adjustments in the training. I personally like to enjoy my training as much as possible. So if I'm adjusting the training high intensity to lower intensity, then I'm enjoying it a little bit more. I think that's great value to get out of the training. You can decrease training hours, for example, which I think is a great strategy around times where you're feeling particularly fatigued or experiencing, you know, major discomfort or even some of those debilitating symptoms. You can remove sports. This would be something very typically done, you know, for people who experience heavy bleeding. Maybe the pool is just off the schedule for a few days. It's just something that you move to the end of the week, or you just skip for the week and you prioritize, you know, maybe running that week, or some, you know, replace it with some yoga, something that feels appropriate to you. So having that level of flexibility and understanding your physiology, I think, is really important. We can also force rest days. So you can ask Hugo to, like particularly around ovulation, women can report feeling particularly fatigued. That could be a good day just to have a rest day. So moving the rest day from another day to that particular day can be a great strategy, again, depending on how you're showing up and what your cycle is like. And getting that high level picture of, you know, knowing your body and what feels right is I guess it's a little bit of an experiment for all of us individually, is knowing that there's no right or wrong, but there are definitely some guiding principles that we can use when we're applying all this knowledge that we're gaining over time to our training. So that's all pretty exciting, you know, to think about what data and information and tools we can lean into to improve our own endurance sports training experience. And I just want to share a personal story that I guess might put a little more light on what Therese alluded to earlier, which is women have this extraordinary mental capacity to overcome and to persevere and push through. I remember many years ago, a dear friend shared a story of her 17-year-old sister who showed up to a national championship event ready to, you know, qualify for the national team. On the first day of her period, she had terrible symptoms, you know, the diarrhea, the heavy bleeding, the headaches, the backaches, like the worst. And you can imagine that felt pretty, you know, debilitating to her just in general. Like this was her day to show up, until her dad said to her, women perform their best on their period. And she went on to win that day. And I don't say that to share a story scientifically. I say that I think that tells us a lot about how women, when they lean into the hard work and the consistency and the dedication to their goal, what capacity we have to overcome. And, you know, it's also like that natural instinct kicks in to overcome, and we can do extraordinary things. So if there's anything that I can say today that's the biggest takeaway, is that women can overcome a lot, and we are incredibly durable. And I think through that level of consistency and knowing our bodies and learning what our bodies can do, I think then we reach really amazing levels of performance. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our pro stars today. I'm so excited to spend the second half of this webinar with Ruth and Daniela. I'm going to ask the question to both of you, and maybe Daniela, you could answer this one first. But how about sharing a moment in your career where you felt that being a woman was a superpower or a real advantage?
Well, actually, thanks for that story before. To be honest, that's maybe just where I should start as well, where I felt superpowers. I do have the same story with having I mean, obviously I've raced a lot, and having a day or race day on my period where I'm one of the ones who are actually struggling quite a lot on 2 days of them. And so it happened to happen on Kona 2015, where I had my worst day, lots of back pain, and really was in big pain. And that was the day where I really wanted to win. And when I look back now, that was my first Kona win, showing the best or one of the best performances. So I can only, how do you say it? No, how do you say that it's true, that you can have the best day when you have your period. And definitely was not, I didn't want to have that day again, because it was tough. I had to suffer and dig really deep. But yeah, it's possible. And I think that's kind of where, I mean, I've always been grateful to be a woman. I never had any moment where I felt like, oh, I wish I could be a man. So even though there's maybe some things which, like the period, which is not always the most exciting thing to get, but I think in general, just to be a woman is kind of what I feel is my superpower.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that, you know, having those experiences where we can reference some of the best in the world, reiterate the messages that Teresa and I shared, which is we are so capable, and we, when we put maybe those, you know, perceived disadvantages aside, we can prove to ourselves time and time again that we can show up. Ruth.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for your presentation, Ray and Therese. It's really fun to talk about this topic with you. I think it's funny when I get asked questions like this, because I'm in my brain, I'm like, well, I've never been a man. I don't know what it's like to be a man, and I'm quite happy to be a female. And I think just really listening to yourself and being secure in yourself is what makes you the best version of yourself, right? Like comparing yourself to somebody else, male, female, whoever it might be, is never going to get the best out of you. You need to look at you and what that's going to be. And I also have a very similar story to what you said, Ray. When I was 17, it was one of my first world championship events, and I was on my period. And I remember the race doctor came to my room and gave me some ibuprofen and helped me out. And from then I just learned to like start taking ibuprofen before my period even started, to just get on top of it, learn what works for me. And I performed well that day as well. So I think, yeah, just in some ways having a period as a woman is a little bit of a superpower, because you can really learn your body and what's going on and pay attention to it a bit more. Men can also fall into REDs or energy deficiencies and don't have such a obvious hormone cycle to immediately pick up on if they're not super in tune with themselves. But for me, learning that since I was such a young age as an athlete, and now being in my 30s and knowing when I'm riding that limit and when I'm not, is really powerful.
Oh, that's a great insight. Yes, because we're almost, I mean, forced, it was encouraged to pay a little more attention. Yeah, really. Good data there for sure. Kind of I guess in, the sense that we've all got that common story or common experience on leaning into when the time is right, and certain strategies that we can employ for optimum performance on any one given day. I'm super interested to learn a little bit more about maybe what habits or strategies you have kind of contributed to most of your success in endurance training. And this could be anything, right? This could be a particular kind of training, a training session, like a key session. It could be nutrition, hydration. It could be, environmental connection to other people. What strategies or habits have you used that have contributed to your success? Daniela, may as well start with you.
Yeah, I mean, the best strategy in the end for me was to just be consistent, train consistent, because that's where I could feel I get the best benefit out of the training. But yeah, I think it's sometimes, you don't really know, like you have to, I think it's in one way, it's also the, the right surrounding, having people you can trust, helping you to reach your goals. And I felt like I always made my decision by feel. When I met my new coach back when I was 14, he convinced me to start with triathlon, and I went straight into it, and I was really excited about it. And then for a while I realized, okay, I need to change something. So I was kind of open again and found a new coach. And I think it's listening to your feelings, and also when you have to change something is something which is very important. And that kind of helped me to go all my way through my career, which you can focus on the data and just kind of go blind. But also I always and had coaches who did both, so they looked at the data, but also really about the human. And I think for me, like being also, I think the psychology part is also very important. It's not only the body itself. I think it's also how motivated are you in the morning when you actually go on the race course. And that has also a huge aspect. And like you mentioned before, like the feelings and being down or having not feeling that well about something that might stress you, that also has an impact. And accepting this helped me a lot to then deal with what I got. And then on race day, I was often able to put it aside, but in training, I had to be always careful to also listen to my signals, and not just what the computer told me. Because some days, like when I was emotional, I struggled to actually train hard. And for example, when I was angry, I could train really well. So actually my coach always made me angry, so I trained better. So that's kind of, that's why I was called Angry Bird.
That's literally where that came from.
Yeah, well, and also my face, apparently, when I'm concentrated, I have this face, I don't know, it's like focus, which kind of, like in one swim session, he just started to call me Angry Bird.
And it's really stuck.
Yeah.
Ruth, what
Yes.
strategies would you talk to?
Yeah, I second for sure the consistency and having a good team around you. And I think it's changed a lot throughout my whole career when I was younger, and now being a little bit more wiser, let's put it that way, maybe. But I think just remaining super consistent in your sport and listening to yourself, like you mentioned on Ray, about taking in the athlete's what they're feeling in the moment, not just all the data. Daniela was also just saying this, I think is really important. And I learned to not be so hard on myself too throughout my career. I think when you're younger and you miss a training session, it's just like my nature to want to give myself such a hard time because I missed it. But in reality, you have to look at this big picture. And that's where the data can really help, is kind of looking at everything in this big picture and looking at it really rationally. And while it's super important to have that emotional input, having the ability to then step back and say like, okay, today I missed a day. here are maybe the reasons why, like, where am I in my period? What are my hormones doing? What happened yesterday? How did I sleep? And having some data points around that helps my emotional, like, well, you just suck, you missed a training day brain. Be like, no, you don't. Like, here are the 5 days before this that you hit really squarely. And here's what the month before this looked real like. And here's what you have coming in the next month. So it's totally okay to take a breath today, listen to your body, take a rest. This program is written in advance, but every day it can change, and just kind of having that flexibility with that.
Ruth, thank you so much for sharing that mental aspect of how we can be critical. We can become our own best critic, in fact, and being able to step away from, being in our heads to looking at the broader picture and all of the aspects that feed into that long-term journey of success. It's not one day, it's not 1 week, it's not 1 month, it's months and months and years of progression and being in tune with ourselves that lead us to that success that we have out there, whatever the success is, for you. Thank you very much. I have another, I guess it sort of ties into that, like, how am I feeling today? How do you quantify that? Like, what have you done over the the years and the decades of training, for both of you, decades literally of training, to understand your body's unique needs, shaping maybe how you train and how you recover? Are there specific things that you're pulling in or relying on or leaning into, to inform a training or recovery?
Yeah, I can go first on this one, if you want, Daniela. Yeah, I guess like apps are a good way to record how you're feeling. For me, I have a period tracker app that I've used for 10 years or something. Like, I'm scared one day if it gets deleted. I think you can back it up some way, but I'm like not that tech savvy. So like if my phone gets lost in, I don't know, a toilet, a porta potty at a race, like that's one thing I'd be sad to lose. My years of data, just like trying to, I'm not super good at inputting always, but it has been really helpful to look back and be like, oh, this is like maybe when my period started to become less consistent, or oh, like I was feeling really the same way when I look back at the last 6 months, at the week before my period, or like one day I have extreme anxiety. And I realize it now, but when I was younger, I needed that app to be like, oh, it's the week, it's always the week before my period. I have a day where I'm just like out of control. And then with training, I've been using platforms to record my power, heart rate, and stuff like that. And then I think like more wearable technology has only been just kind of coming in, that I've used in the last year, and I've been super resistant to it because I'm like, I just want to tell you how I feel. I don't want something to tell me I feel bad when what if I feel good, and all of this. So I think that's really where my sense of listening to myself has come in, and then communicating that really well with my team. And I have like my professional cycling team, Human Powered Health, and coaches there. And then I have kind of like my Ruth team, who is the coach that I talk to every day, my psychologist. I work with a different life coach as well, and really communicating with them how I'm doing physically and emotionally to get like the most out of me, so that I'm not also always just making those decisions that made by other people that can help me make an informed decision and take some of that emotional weight away from me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different. It took me a long time to actually start tracking anything because all my old coaches were kind of against it. And I think there's like advantages and disadvantages to it. I think one advantage was that I felt a bit more free. I was just not rethinking it. I would just do. And so how we worked was mainly by looking at me, and depending on how I walked up the stairs, he would give me the session. And what I started to then realize for myself is that for me, the heart rate was something I could really relate to. So depending on my heart rate, the resting heart rate, but also how it acts during the session, I could really start to learn how my body is doing. And that's pretty much all I used. I didn't use any power for most of my career. And also in the races, I went just out with any data and just went hard. But I think for training for me, it was important to have the heart rate to not overtrain and not to push too hard all the time, but also realizing, like, for example, if I could not push it up, that I was tired or underfueled. And signals like this, with my feeling, I could then really start to learn or get to know my body better. But yeah, that's how everyone is different. And I think sometimes when I look back, I wish I would have a bit more data, because of course it probably would have saved me one or the other stress, moments where I didn't really understand what was happening. But I could also see, I would probably say I'm like a little bit an obsessive person. If I have a goal, I go very hard for that goal. That definitely helped me to be successful. But overusing that can also be dangerous. And I think measuring is important, but same with weight. For me, I had a time where I was weighing myself way too much and it got too extreme. And then my head was just spinning around the weight, which then I had to really stop. And for me, it felt healthier to not constantly check how heavy I am, because especially with weight, we all know it can vary so much depending on how much you drank, how much you ate, how much you sweat. So it's a metric which I would not recommend to do too often.
Yeah, that's another really powerful insight there, Daniela, is just understanding why things are the way that they are, but not over-analyzing it, and be the observer, be the non-judgmental observer of what's showing up in the data and how you're feeling, and not have it be the thing that defines you on any one particular day. Yeah, sort of talking to that long-term trajectory and journey that we're all on. So I'd like to maybe shift the tone of the questioning a little bit, more to, the idea of celebrating women and girls in sport today. Little higher level question for you both. Maybe Daniela, you can start with this one. What aspects of women and girls being involved in sport are you really hopeful about as we look to the future of women and girls being involved in sport? And it doesn't have to be one particular area, but are there aspects of this that you are stoked and excited about, coming up?
Yeah, for sure. I can only speak for me. For me, it helped me to kind of let my way of life. And I think it's for any girl, I want them to have the opportunity to go into the sports, because sports is something that really can teach you so many things, and also having something to hold on in a phase, especially during the youth time, when your body changes a lot. It can be quite stressful and also overwhelming. And for me, around 14, 15, 16, I definitely had also other topics which I was interested in. And I'm very sure I would have probably done many more stupid things if I was not into sports. And having that also guidance, having friends you can go to in training, often just because my friend was in swim training, that was the reason why I went to swim training. I was not really interested in swim training in the beginning, but it was the social aspect about it. And through that friendship built, and my 3 times a week, my evenings were kind of blocked. So I was busy doing swim training. And I think it's very important to give young girls a structure, because that, I feel, can then help to find a good path in life. And I think it's great to see that the women's sports are coming bigger and bigger. I think in terms of triathlon, we've had a nice history. I think it's been a long time that we had very equal payments, and we had equal distances, which I'm happy, because I like it longer. So I would not be happy if we had shorter distances than the men. And I really like to see that that there's the same opportunities for girls in triathlon than for men or for boys. And of course, I want to support any kid who wants to go into triathlon, because yeah, it's or in any sport, it doesn't have to be triathlon, but just having something to strive for, and yeah, get busy with something that's going to help you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Ruth?
Yeah, I think what would I tell my younger self, or what would I tell a young junior cyclist that I would talk to today? And I would just feel like, you have time, like, don't stress. You have so much time. Have fun with it. There's so much sport out there, and I love it. I love the community that I have. I love that you can do it at basically any level through a lot of sports. Cycling specifically, anybody can go and ride a bike. Hopefully, if you live in a area that's with traffic, you have good bike paths or good trails or something like that. But it's such a good way to be outside. And I think when we live in such a busy world and a lot of pressure from school and outside, it's such a great way to, I don't know, just go and feel whatever feeling you want to feel at the time, and whether you want to take that into a more serious way and race, or you just want to be able to release outside some way throughout your life. I think it's just such a good, fun thing to have. I do have a sister that hates bike riding and doing that, but she weightlifts, so she's found something else, like there's so many different ways you can go out and just feel active and good about yourself, and maybe a bit more confident, and really learn a skill in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we hand it over to our community Q&A, I'm dying to ask this question. It's sort of like the first question I would have liked to have asked. I would love to hear, I'm sure our audience would too, a little bit about one of your career highlights, and how that relates to being a female in your sport, something that you celebrated and felt deeply personal to you. Ruth, sort of on the back of, kids growing up through sport and having an element of joy in it, and then moving and transitioning into that pro field. Is there a time in your career that you'd like to share, it's sort of, in celebration of being a woman?
Yeah. For me, it's still the same race from 2013 that I remember. I really learned how to race a bike with the US national team. We were going to the Giro Rosa, which is I think it was 8 days at the time. I think it's maybe now 9 days, but a long stage race for us in Italy. And I was still newer to racing. I hadn't really raced on a team, but you go with a team of 7 other women. So there's a team of 8 that go. And even now to this day, we have a group text thread with this group of women that I went with, and we still keep in touch. We had a 10-year reunion 2 years ago, and I just think that they taught me so much about racing, but traveling over to Europe and being a teammate and like going for this goal. In the end, we won the entire stage race with Mara Abbott, won the overall GC, and she got the jersey on day 1, so we had to defend it the entire week. It was the hottest week. I had to take a month off the bike afterwards because I was this 18-year-old that just got pummeled into the ground. But I just remember I learned so much over such a short period of time then, and still to this day I'm friends with these women, and I think about now when I'm riding with younger riders on the team, like how I can still remember myself then in that time, and like how I saw what was like, oh my gosh, they were 28, so old, and it's like this 19-year-old, and now I'm that rider on the team, and I have teammates that were born in like 2004, and you're like, how is that possible? And just trying to take that time, and I really look so fondly on that time and how it's really shaped me as the athlete that I was then and am now.
That's a nice story. Yeah, for me, I think it's also quite an early one. When I don't know how old I was, but I must have been like 15, 16 when we had the team European Championship. with my two best friends, and it was kind of just, you know, a fun trip. We went, it felt like a girls' trip, and it really helped me to not be too nervous. And we won that race. It was back then it was everyone was going together, so we had to actually help each other on the swim and bike, and then also the best three who the third one who crosses the line that was the time that mattered. So we pushed each other, and it's just, I think that really also shows like how sport can bind, because one of them is still my best friend. She's like, yeah, I'm the godmom of her son. And for me, it's really just nice to make, like, you cannot make friends that deep than in sport. I think we don't see each other that much, especially when I was still racing. We might have seen each other twice a year, but we're still best friends, and it's that bond that can never go like break because it's just so deep. And I think these experiences and also extreme moments where you might have a great race together, or just in general like training camps and pushing through these moments together, for me that's still also one of the reasons why I started with triathlon, and also why I became motivated, because she was 3 years older than me. So when I joined the team, I was just really motivated to catch up with her, and I managed to do that quite quickly. But I'm also sure that was the reason why I could evolve so much as a junior. And so sport is not just about making success and medals, it's also you make friendships for life.
Yeah, so true. What you share on the training track is not like anything else that you share in life. And the bonds that are made are very deep. Absolutely. And talk about, you know, having training buddies over the decades again of your career. I'm sure there are people that even if you don't see very often, you hold very dear to your heart, because they influenced you in such a positive way and guided the way. They were the shining light that you were able to aspire to tuck in under their wing and follow along. Thank you for sharing those stories. We have a couple of questions from our audience here. A lot to choose from, and some of them we've sort of slightly addressed, but this one here I think is probably something that we're all maybe even asking top of our heads, and we've probably all been there. If you're a woman and have turned up to race day, you know, and felt pretty bad because of your cycle, have you ever considered not actually starting a race because of your cycle or how you were feeling on race day? Daniela?
No. For me, it was always very clear, if I race, I race. And yeah, that might have helped me to actually, I mean, if I would have had the chance or the thought, then that might have been even a way to get out. But for me, when I was lining up, then I went through it. And yeah, I mean, definitely I had to take painkillers for sure. Otherwise, there are some days, even if I lie on the couch, I struggle. And so I have to take some painkillers. I always, just try to think of, I have what I have, and my 100% today might be not 100%, but I trusted in myself that I can also win with 95%. And it didn't really help me to think, oh, I could, if this would not be like this, then maybe I would be better. So I just really try to focus on what I can do, and that meant to accept the pain and push through. But maybe I should also mention, like, that was at a World Championship and it went for my first title. So I think it depends, like, if I would have done this for joy and as a hobby, I don't blame anyone who would say, hey, you know what, today I don't feel like racing. I think it's a little bit of difference if you trained your whole life for something and then you have the day, like at the Olympics or World Championship, you have one chance a year. then you really want to take that chance, or at least I do. And of course, you always have the option. But for me, sometimes it helped me to not even think about the options.
Yeah, I've never not started a race. For road cycling. You race anywhere between 40 and 70 times a year. So it would be pretty challenging if that's what I wanted to do. I have missed altered training days though. And I agree with what Daniela said. I think if this is my job, right, I can't show up to work and then just say I don't really want to work today because I have some cramps. Like, sometimes you just have to get on with it, and work isn't always fun. There are some days that are definitely more fun than others, but this is also when I think that tracking for me has been super helpful, because most of the time, if you've signed up for a race or if you have an event on your calendar, like for me, I know my race calendar more or less like a few months before it starts. And so if I know my cycle, and I can kind of say like, okay, not every race is an A race, but I can look at my A races and I can say, here is when I think I'll be in my hormonal cycle. So what do I know about myself now today, and what can I do to make sure I tune up my best possible on that day? Sometimes I'm like, yes, I'm like, will have just been on day 3 of my period, I'm gonna feel amazing, like I'll have had the cramps and I'll have had the blah feeling, but like I'll be on the high from my hormones being lower, and I'll be super excited about that race, knowing that that's what's going to happen. And maybe it's a day later or a day sooner, but like I'll psych myself up. Or if I know that it's that day, around that day I get super anxiety, then I just have awareness around it, and I'll be like, hey, you guys, like this might happen, and I'm doing everything I can now to like make sure that I'm in the best place I can be on race day. But like maybe I'll be a little on edge, so if I don't talk to you at breakfast, it's not because I don't like you, I just need to like do my own thing.
Yeah, knowing where you're at on any particular day is definitely a good strategy in life and in performance, I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Ruth and Daniela. So inspiring. You've shared some really, deeply personal stuff here today. You've inspired me. I have absolutely no doubt that you've inspired our audience here to lean into the unique physiology of women and endurance sports in particular, and understand that there's no right or wrong, that we all show up differently on different days, but we can draw on data and information and science in a very kind of in a tapestry kind of methodology, and pull what we need to help guide us and show up to be the most resilient and best version of ourselves on any one particular day. I would like to wrap up just by saying we got a lot of questions in the Q&A. Sorry, we got some great questions in the Q&A. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of those. We maybe could do this again, celebrating women in sport on an ongoing basis. That never stops for us here at Human Go. I wanted to share with you a discount code that any one of our listeners can use today. Women's Endurance 25 will get you 25% off access to the Human Go app. And I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Therese, for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom and personal insights today. And thank you to our audience for joining and celebrating women and girls in sports today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.